Well, it's a very pleasant early May evening, 5th of May this evening, only 2 or 3 nights after a rather disastrous moth trapping escapade at Eakin at Lound Wood, where I think I only had 9 moths of 5 species. It was unbelievably poor. I'm hoping for better this evening, but I'm also hoping that the temperature doesn't drop lower than the 10 centigrade that they're forecasting it to drop down to. There's a couple of green carpets I've noticed on the wing already, so I'm hoping to catch at least a couple of green carpets, but hopefully more than the other night. The good thing about tonight, there's no breeze, no wind at all. It's as still as anything, and that makes a very pleasant change. Well, I imagine that many moth trappers will be horrified by this view, me choosing to run a trap in a car park with 2 floodlights in it, or 3, depending on which way the lights are angled. But this is the darker end of this particular car park. There are security lights around this area, and that's obviously for the security of buildings. But does it put off the moths? I don't think it does in particular, to be honest. But at this end of the car park, no bright lights here. It's the second time I've trapped here. The first time was a month or so ago. I think it would be March when I came here and trapped, and we had decent numbers of moths there despite it being quite cool and breezy. Different again tonight. I think the sky is going to clear, and just hope that temperature stays up. But hopefully, once I switch on the light and get that running, we'll catch a few moths. Just over 20 minutes gone since I switched the light on, and I've just had the first moth that's flowed past, and it was a green carpet. No surprise there, but the lack of moths currently is something that seems to be nationwide at the moment. Certainly it is in Nottinghamshire. People are reporting catches of just a couple of moths in their garden traps. But when I trapped at Lound Wood the other night, it was such a poor night. I think it's probably the worst early May night that I've had, and that's without looking back at our old records. It seems especially poor. And moths are certainly late, but I think moths are still in poor numbers, and I think it's the effect of the last 2 years of those periods of very hot weather that we had in 2023, but especially in 2022. 2022 was a disastrous year. As much as people think that insects will benefit from hot, dry sunshine, indeed they may well do, but it shortens the cycle. And it also kills off the food plants, so the caterpillars can't get through to pupation, so you end up with a lack of moths. Next couple of years you may see smaller numbers of many early flying species, just because it's been so wet. So we'll see what happens this evening. Not a great deal at the moment, but this can't and won't continue. Some moths will come in. I'll be amazed if I get as few species as I did the other night here. and also amazed if I get as few moths as I did the other night. Things have got to improve, and we've had a couple of really nice days. Today has been beautiful, lovely and warm, and lots of invertebrate activity, and that wants to continue once the skies get dark. Well, 40 minutes into the session and the moths have started to come in, and I thought I'd got all green carpets in, but I haven't. One of what I suspected by flight was a green carpet has turned out to be this beautiful streamer, absolutely stunning moth, which we saw fairly recently. Absolutely fabulous. And this looks a nice pristine condition one. It's a nice moth to get. I'm pleased to get a streamer. It's not widely caught, at least I'm not aware of it being widely caught, but it's just nice to get here. What a corker. This is not a moth that I've had in my garden. Many of you may well have done. This is almost certainly a moth that you need to go into decent habitat to get. It's very much a woodland moth based on my own experience. So promising now, after almost 3/4 of an hour of nothing. And Elise Black Archers has also just joined the party. So streamer, and now the moths are coming in. Now I mentioned that this moth had come in the last clip, and this is a very fresh, as you would expect, pebble hooktip. This is one of those species which are just starting to come onto the wing now, and what a cracking moth it is. We really do have a very good variety of moths in the UK. We really need to publish and push our moths, in fact all our invertebrate fauna, to be honest. And what a super moth. It is fairly common. It'll turn up in many suburban gardens. High numbers will be caught trapping in a woodland area like this. What an absolute belter though, isn't it? So that's pebble hooktip. Quite a standout moth on its own. There's little that you can mix this species up with, even the other hooktips. It's a real beauty. Well, here's a moth that's just come in. Many people will know this straight away. This is, of course, silver wye. Silver wyes are still primarily migrants to the UK, but I believe that they are able to survive the winter now in southern and southwestern parts of the UK, something that they couldn't do 30 or 40 years ago. But another common moth which suffers from being so common, and you're equally as likely to see this moth during the daytime, flushing it from grassland, or it coming to nectar on the valerian in your garden. In fact, I probably see more of these by day than what I do attract to NV light. But silver wye is a very attractive moth, named after that upside down Y-shaped marking in the middle of the forewings. Nice to know these are here, and an arrival of silver wyes usually coincides with an arrival of migrant butterflies, and this year again it seems to be red admirals. I've had a number of red admirals in the last couple of days. Always coincides with an arrival of these. So you can look forward to a summer of silver wyes visiting your garden and your NV light trap. But a lovely moth. Have a look at a silver wye next time. They really are underappreciated. Well, this has finally settled down, but this is a moth that I don't think I've ever showed on this channel, but this is a white pinion spotted. I probably haven't showed it because it's not a moth that I've ever trapped fairly regularly, or indeed with any regularity. I've certainly gone a couple of years at times without trapping this, but I do seem to think it turned up at Misson last year later in May. This one, obviously, very fresh out and in pristine condition. Pure white, really pure silky white. The only discernible markings are those two brown, chocolate brown markings on the fore edge or leading edge of the wings. Beautiful little thing. Another nice one for the evening. Well, that flurry of activity has took the time nicely on to 10:15, so an hour and 20 minutes since I started, and we've had a total now of 15 moths of 9 species, so I'm more than happy with that. We've bettered previous attempt and previous trapping session from Lound Wood. Moths which have recently come in, nothing particularly exciting. These two, grey pine carpet has turned up, and first of many brindled pugs of the next few weeks, no doubt. So we're doing well. The 9 species that we've got: a grey pine carpet, brindled pug, lunar marble, brown, white, pinion spotted, streamer and silver Y, pebble hook tip, 3 of those, least black archers, and now 5 green carpet. So we're doing pretty well, better than the first 3/4 of an hour would suggest, thankfully. Well, now this has settled down and we've not got too many fresh moths coming in at the moment. This is the grey pine carpet that you may have heard me mention. Nothing particularly remarkable about this species, and most grey pine carpets are variations on the moth that you can see in front. It does vary in background coloration to the wings, but that various width and sized band across the wings remains fairly constant, but it can be partially broken up. A moth very much of this time of year, once you get into late April and into May, but it's also a moth that will be encountered later again in the year. And certainly at this site I remember catching a number of these at light during the autumn. So, grey pine carpet, and we're doing well for species. I think we're on 10 species now. Well, that was the view and the general sort of situation and layout of where I'm trapping here at Ransom Wood. I do like it here, and there are security guards on site as well, which gives an added extra element of security, although the site is private and is fenced off. There's a bat flying around there, just going around, a rather large bat, as you may well be able to get a glimpse of. But so far, a much better trapping session than I was hoping for or anticipating, to be honest. More than double the range of species I had at Lound Wood, and certainly more moths. Not great numbers, but that's how moth trapping in the first half of May can get. It's often very disappointing, especially after the good numbers of moths that you can get in February and the first part of March. Well, things have gone pretty well in this last half hour or so, and the number of moths, and indeed species especially, has increased. We're well over 20 odd species. There's a few late stragglers as well. Got Hebrew character, which not entirely surprised about, but I'm surprised at a late clouded drab. And it was quite tatty, which you would expect clouded drabs to be at this time of year. But some nice moths, some of which I can show you. Nut tree tussock is, well, there's several in, about 4 I think we've had in, but Chinese character, single grey birch, 3 brown silver lines have come in, and 1 or 2 other species too. Nothing rare or particularly unusual, but nut tree tussock is always nice. I'm sure it's probably been recorded here before, and it's very much a Sherwood Forest speciality in Nottinghamshire. But things are looking up, and it has turned a little bit cooler now. We're down to 10 centigrade now, so the temperature has dropped, and at times it does feel like 10 centigrade. But progress has been made. Well, here's one of the nut tree tussocks that's come in. All the 4 that are in are marked pretty much the same as this, the basal half of the forewings is very dark brown, almost appearing black in this light, and in contrast the other half of the wings are very light grey and various markings on there too. It's a very attractive moth and not all that widespread in Nottinghamshire. It's very much a Sherwood Forest speciality here in Nottinghamshire. So nice to see, very pleased to get that. So that's nut tree tussock. Probably not a moth that anyone's going to get in the garden in Nottinghamshire, but elsewhere in the UK, potentially quite possible. Well, this moth trapping session has gone far deeper into the night than I was anticipating. I've had some welcome company by one of the security guards that works here, which has been nice, and we've stood talking for well over an hour. A number of moths have come in since the last little update, and I will go through the list in a minute or two. But it's been a really good session. I'm amazed actually. I didn't think that I'd get well over 20 species, which is what we're on now. And then that certainly didn't look possible at all after 3/4 of an hour or even an hour into this session. But once the sky had darkened properly, that's when the moths started to come in. And once we hit midnight, another range of moths and species started to come in. No brindle beauty. I thought and expected brindle beauty to come in, but we've had to make do with nut tree tussock. So a very profitable session and very pleasing too. There's some nice moths been here tonight. I've not been able to film them all. Always leave some for another video. Well, the temperature's dropped down to 9 centigrade and it's time to call it a night. In fact, I could say it's time to call it a morning, because we're approaching 2 o'clock. I never dreamt that I would be here until the early hours of the morning, but it's been a really good session. Ended up with 25 species. There's a couple of micros to look at, and they will be looked at in the daytime. But I think overall, nut tree tussock is probably the most surprising and pleasing record of tonight. But flame carpet was nice, and a good list of early spring species. Obviously some moths are now starting to appear on the wing, and the species list should increase more as we go through into the second half of May. But with the temperature now of below 10, it's time to pack up.